Hello everybody and welcome to today's watch party for Interview with the Vampire. As always, I'm Andrew and Dom is having a break this week, so I'm joined by Sharon from our community. Welcome, Sharon.
Hello, hello, community.
It's fantastic to have you here. Yes, Hannah, we are watching the 1994 Tom Cruise Brad Pitt version of the movie. So to say to everybody, our sync point today is where you see the Geffen Pictures logo appear on screen, where it says Geffen Pictures. But let's do a roll call and then we'll start discussing the movie and get this show on the road. So I can see we've got Eric, Fraglord, Calbot, Jedi Wizard, Lizard Man, Edward the Black Prince, Hannah Rose, artist, Phonic, Mad Matt. Let's go through, and of course Sharon is here with us already. So, and then I think that's everyone over there, and of course James Hellier over on YouTube and Jesse Torres. Hi guys. Right. So while everyone gets in place for starting the movie, Sharon, when did you think? We were discussing this before we went live. When do you think you first saw this movie? Was it the year it came out? Do you think?
I am trying to remember. I cannot remember when I first saw it. I'm not even sure I saw it in movie theater. Probably when it came out on video. That would be my guess. Maybe a year or two after it came out.
Okay. For me, it was a movie I saw when it came out, and I was discussing before this. I was quite soured to this movie shortly after I first saw it, and it wasn't deliberately this movie's fault. I saw this movie as a teenager. I was 16. I went on a date, and it was the date movie. And I was with the girl for a few months, and then we broke up. I didn't do anything. I didn't turn into a vampire or lock her in a tower of sunlight or anything like that. The relationship just didn't work out, as happens when you're a teenager. However, it soured me to the movie because I always associated that relationship with this film for quite a while. So I didn't watch it. And then about 10 years ago, I rewatched this movie, and I think I'd matured into it in some ways. I think the difference between 16-year-old Andrew and 30-something-year-old Andrew is I could appreciate a lot of different themes in the movie, maybe some of the life experiences and things I'd had. So yeah, it's great. Calbot says, I saw this in the theatre. My brother worked at the Theatre of the Mall of America in the 90s, so I got to see a lot of movies for free. That's fantastic. That's absolutely fantastic. But right, so what we'll do is let's get the film going. We've got a lot to get through. So on the count of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, press play. There we go. Oh, Geffen Pictures. That's nostalgic. It reminds me of, I think, a lot of MTV movies as well in the 90s.
I don't even think they're around anymore, right? We don't see that logo.
No, I don't know. But I do love this film. It starts off, it just starts off great. I like the whole sort of view of the city at night.
Tom Cruise got top billing.
Yeah. He would have been the biggest star at the time. Stephen Ree has quite high billing as well. He's a great British actor, but he's not. Thank you, James. Geffen Pictures is now part of DreamWorks.
There you go. So
there is something great about cities like this at night, isn't there? They're beautiful. The kind of
Kirsten, yeah, not Kristen. We were talking about that before.
Kirsten, yeah. Thank you, Lizard Man, as well.
Man, this movie takes me back before Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise were the mega stars they are today.
Yeah. Well, James Helly says Tom Cruise having top billing was controversial as Anne Rice rubbished his casting. And Hannah says she misses the Geffen logo. I do too. Yeah. I don't know. I just love the look of. This is making me nostalgic for the 90s. I don't know. Even the look of it is very 90s. The city, the fashions, just everything. It does take me back to I'm nostalgic for the 80s, but I was quite young in the 80s, and I lived my should we say, my youth, where I could actually do things in the 90s. So that's why I'm quite looking forward to our 90s sort of journey we're starting on.
Yeah, that was I grew up in the 80s, and so the 90s I was on my own, graduated college in 91, and I was, yeah, a different time in my life.
Oh, definitely.
And if I remember correctly, she didn't want Tom Cruise. She wanted Julian Sands.
I love
If
Julian
I
Sands, and
if I remember that correctly.
I love Julian Sands, and I hope somehow he's okay.
He's still missing,
Yeah, yeah,
as far as I've heard, but
yeah,
I hope they find him.
yeah. And I hope they find him well. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Let's all hope, because he's. I mean, as the Warlock, he is incredible.
Yeah. So 1994, how many movies had Brad Pitt been in up until this point? Anybody know?
I'm
And what
not
was his
even.
biggest billing before this?
Was it Thelma and Louise? Or the Frosties commercial he did?
Oh, he did commercials?
Yeah, yeah. He
I
did
was not
ketchup.
lucky enough to see any of those.
He did ketchup and Frosties, Heinz ketchup.
Okay. I seem to remember Thelma and Louise, and then all of a sudden he was this mega star.
Yeah. This is very classic Christian Slater. That kind, the performance he gives, this kind of mousy, squirrely kind of way he always delivered his lines in the 90s. Ooh. James Helly says it's his 17th movie.
Who, Brad Pitt's 17th movie at this point?
Apparently so, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, Hannah Rose, exactly. In this universe, JD survived the explosion and went on to interview vampires.
So who has also read the books, the vampire trilogies by Anne Rice?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
And I think as well we'll also ask people who saw this movie without reading the books. I mean, I myself, I was totally unaware of the books when I went into this. I didn't have any, it was pre-internet, really,
Yep.
for most people, and I was unaware of anything around this apart from it was a vampire movie that some girls wanted to go and see. Yeah, James says he read the books, and Jesse says, I didn't know it was a book until after. Edward says, I didn't know there was a book. And Jedi Wizard said, I never read the books, saw this first not knowing there was one.
Yeah, and the book had come out a couple years previous. Anne Rice just hit the stage running with her vampire trilogy, and this movie was a big deal back in the
Yeah.
day. I can't even remember the book, but I know I read the book, along with like everything by Stephen King, Dean Koontz, Clive Barker, you name it. That's what I was into.
What I really enjoy this one is it turns into a period piece at times, doesn't it? It really turns into sort of a period drama.
Yeah, and you're getting his life before
Yeah.
he became a vampire. And it doesn't seem all that glorious to become one
No,
at the
not
end of the
at all.
day.
Ah.
Ooh.
I wonder if that bar he's in is supposed to be in New Orleans, which I think this is supposed to be. There is a famous bar called the Black Cat. And that bar is called the Black Cat that he's in. So
Yeah, I think this does take place in New Orleans.
Yeah, they said it was sort of near sort of New Orleans.
And he
Exactly.
definitely had the death wish.
Yeah. Exactly, Hannah. The 90s and the noughties were dominated by vampires. It wouldn't be until the
Mhm.
2010s that zombies took over. I think as well, I was saying that in the UK, I think one of the reasons the kind of popularity of this happened was in part due to Lost Boys, because Lost Boys was kind of a very cool teen vampire movie. I know it was 87 in, well, when it was released theatrically. However, it was on sort of TV rotation fairly regularly in the UK in the early 90s, where a lot of people, especially the girls I knew in school, really got into it. And that's kind of start off the vampire stuff. And then they had Dracula, and then this, and it was all that kind of sexy vampire stuff that mercifully. This stuff was great, but then I'm not going to upset people. I know some people have love for the Twilight series. I'm not one of them. Yeah, Hannah, exactly. Lost Boys is the gold standard of vampire movies. Yeah, James, Lost Boys, and Fright Night were very big, but it's all the sexy vampire stuff, isn't it?
Well, when you set the bar as high as Lost Boy did,
Yeah,
then that's at least what I was searching for.
yeah,
There's no reason we should watch grungy, dirty old vampires. We want the sexy ones.
yeah,
And I really do appreciate the eye candy that as a young girl going to the theater, we appreciated that and wanted that every once in a while instead of a lot of the movies. We got the eye candy for the boys, which was fine. But here
yeah.
we have Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt. I
I
mean,
can tell you something. Water in a river in that era, there would be no way I'd want to be going in there, because if not from
no.
the vampire bite, what he's just contracted from that river will be as terrible, because basically back then rivers and sewers were the same thing.
And being washed up in that water onto a,
Yeah, with an open
yeah,
wound on your neck. Yeah,
no.
you need more than your Neosporin.
But he did get bit at
Yeah,
that point by Lestat, so
it's true.
it's just a matter of time. And now the bromance
Yeah,
begins with the undertones of something more.
yeah. I think the thing it's worth noting on this film, the way I've always framed it is, Lestat is quite a tragic character in that even from this film, as you begin to learn that he's lonely. He wants a friend. He wants a friend who's never going to leave him, because he obviously views himself above humans, above normal humans, as creatures or stock to feed on or something. But he walks in eternity. So unless he can find someone who is of the same, a vampire too, he will ultimately always be alone.
Wow. That the whole idea of immortality
Yeah,
may sound sexy, but that's really the cost, isn't it?
yeah,
You walk the
exactly.
world immortal,
Yeah,
and your only companion would have to be someone else immortal.
exactly. Eric says it exactly right. Lestat is lonely and he cannot adjust to the world around him anymore. Exactly. He needs to shape the world to him. Yeah.
That's a good comment, Edward. Undertones my ass. Sharon Tom was the pinnacle of gay vampire. Yeah, I remember when it was released in the theater, it was this big controversy, but not really in a really over the top way. I think a lot of people saw that the gay tendencies, but it really wasn't in your face in the movie. So there is room for saying, well, they're not outright, but then I would fall back to what Anne Rice did in her book, and I don't remember her description of their relationship. I don't know if it ever was at that level. I don't know if
Yeah.
anybody else remembers the book. Is if Yeah, I don't know.
I
So
will
it,
say one thing about Tom Cruise. In every movie he's in, especially nowadays, he does throw himself so far into the role. He really. I know a lot of people have problems with him. I will say I respect the guy for. Nowadays, he probably would have had his blood drained and replaced with vampire blood for getting into the role. Well, actually, the real worry was Daniel Day-Lewis was originally going to play Lestat in this movie.
oh,
Now Daniel Day-Lewis probably would have had his teeth replaced with vampire teeth and his blood drained and stuff because he is such a method
he's
actor.
like, yeah.
Yeah, he'd have been eating raw steak in his trailer and drinking rat blood and stuff.
Well, Tom Cruise is in his 50s now. Is he late 50s and still doing his
I
own
think
stunts?
he's 60.
Yeah,
I
maybe
think
he is immortal. Still doing his own stunts.
he's six. Yeah, he's 60. So he will be 61 this year. If I get to look that good at 60, I'd be happy.
Oh,
But I guess when you probably sleep in an oxygen tent with unicorn blood or something, I don't
did you
know.
hear that? They said the same thing about Michael Jackson sleeping in like a pressure tank, an
Yeah,
oxygen pressure tank. So there are wild rumors out there.
yeah, exactly. Hannah says he was great in Top Gun Maverick. Controversially as he is, there's no denying he's great at what he does. And Calbot says, for a while I really hated Tom Cruise, but more recently I've realised he's in a lot of great movies. So I've come around to realise I still think he's a bit nuts, but I like his work. Yeah, he's dedicated. And that new Mission Impossible film looks so awesome.
Yeah, the Brad Pitt as a
Yeah,
vampire. Yeah,
yeah.
Team Brad Pitt over Tom Cruise, I think.
Yeah, Lizard Man, it does feel maybe a little homoerotic, but it's the whole thing. It's he's sharing himself with him, isn't it? It's. I suppose it's quite. It is possibly the being made into a vampire could be deemed as somewhat of an erotic act in these movies, and it's.
Well, is there a reason why he didn't choose a female and he chose a male?
Mm,
Again, I don't remember the book. I remember I read the book, but I don't remember if there was an underlying reason.
yeah,
But that's where the whole is it a bromance? Is it something more?
yeah. It could be as well. I think maybe Lestat's looking for an equal.
Maybe.
Are you saying you want to do a watch party of Dracula Dead and Loving It?
Would that fall under sci-fi comedy, horror
Frag
comedy?
Lord raises a good
Gotta be
one. Would
comedy.
Frag Lord raises a good one. Vampire in Brooklyn. That is one we've discussed, and I think that might be one for when Carla joins us at some point. So I'll keep an eye on that one because Carla was saying she quite likes that movie.
With Eddie Murphy, I don't think I've seen that. Was that a comedy or is that a drama?
It's like a kind of semi-serious. It's got bits of comedy in it.
Okay.
It, but it certainly isn't. It's not on the scale of this movie. Just a couple of vampire dudes out on the town.
Going for a drink,
Yeah,
and he found her right there.
yeah. Oh, James says, I'm not a fan of Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise. He's been in a lot of commercially successful movies, but I can't think of one I actually like. That's interesting. But each to their own. Each to their own, James.
Well, there's no denying. I think the reason why studios like him is because his movies make money.
Yeah.
I think no matter
Oh,
what he's in
definitely.
these days.
Oh, he even keeps that little sort of claw thimble, doesn't he, within
Ow!
the yeah.
So they're feasting on her. Nobody notices.
I don't know. I suppose maybe some of it because they can't particularly see her feasting, and maybe it's they think she's possibly as a barmaid. She's also a lady of the night, and they think it's just something two dudes having a bit of a kiss with her, and it's not out of the ordinary because it
That's true.
unless you were looking quite close, it would look like they were just both enjoying her company.
Oh, Mad Matt. That is one of my favorite vampire movies. Love it. First Bite. Love it. Definitely on the comedic side.
You've not touched your grapes and ham.
That's probably one of her first movies, Thandie Newton.
Yeah, it must be. It definitely will be one of her first. Strange enough, because wasn't her one of her major roles in Mission Impossible with Tom Cruise? Mission Impossible 2, I believe.
Yes, I was just going to say that I don't think she was in the first one. I think she was in the second one.
Yeah, Mission Impossible 2 in the year 2000. That was one of her major roles.
Oh, don't eat the rat. Oh, don't eat the
No,
rat.
he's just drinking the blood. Lizardman says, the real reason I don't want to be a vampire, I'd have to give up my grapes and ham dinners. They look good grapes, though. Nice plump grapes.
The blood from all of those different animals and humans has got to taste different. So I cannot
Yeah.
imagine that blood from a rat would taste good. If I
Well,
was to imagine.
considering what rats eat, no. I
Yeah.
mean, if we assume it's similar to like, where you get like corn-fed chicken, or you get certain things fed on certain things to make the meat taste a certain way. Well, rats eat rubbish most of the time. And to be honest, New Orleans hasn't changed much since then. No, I don't think rats are going to be like Wagyu beef.
So we are 21 minutes in. It's kind of a slow pace, but it's
It's
just setting the
constant.
story.
I'd say it's constant. I don't think the story really has any. It doesn't have any bits where it goes nothing happening. It's just it's a steady. The pacing's fairly good, but it's just steady throughout. There's no bits where it races forward in the plot.
Right.
I do know the rumor. Apparently, Tom Cruise had basically platform shoes on for most of his scenes.
So it is
Because
true he's really short.
yeah, Tom Cruise he's not as tall as Brad Pitt. Tom is what's that in old-fashioned measurements? Yeah. Tom Cruise is 5'6" apparently.
Well, that's not too terribly bad.
Brad Pitt is 5'11".
Yeah, that's a difference.
Yeah, so I can understand. So that guy in reality must be really short then, unless Tom's in his heels. I think the thing probably to note is that some people may say some of the sexuality undertones and bits we're seeing in this movie, like that clearly gay youth we're seeing there, is slotted in. But it's probably worth noting that in history, it's all been around for a very long time. It's just the attitudes of society have changed with things becoming more out in the open. So it's only just showing what's probably always existed. I'm not a fan of yappy dogs myself. Not that I'd hurt one.
Well, when they're done with their meals, yeah, they can go after the dog.
Well,
Oh, he is going after the dog. Okay,
yeah,
I yeah. Instead of her.
instead of the grandmother.
That's and it is interesting. Lestat's attitude towards the young man he was about to bleed out was very sexual. The way that the
Oh,
camera,
definitely.
and then Louis's attitude towards this older lady was, he didn't want to kill her.
No.
So he would rather kill a dog.
He'd rather eat animals than
He'd,
people, he
he'd
said.
rather eat animals.
But this is something we were starting to discuss again before we came on air, is they have almost an abusive relationship. It's this kind of controlling aspect of Lestat saying it's my way or the highway. You'll come round to my way of thinking.
Well, I think eventually he's going to have to.
Yeah.
Vampires, that's what they survive on, is human blood.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, to be an unwilling participant and to be a vampire sort of against your will, and you're thrown
Yeah.
into a society and a culture that you don't want to be a part of, and how do you accept it?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And you want to fight it and not kill people as long as you can.
You've got to remember as well, Lestat's been a vampire obviously much longer than Louis. Louis's only been a vampire now for a very short time. So Lestat maybe at the start had to go through this kind of moral roller coaster Louis on, but he's past the journey now, Lestat is. So it's like, yeah.
Yeah.
Lizard Man, where are they geographically in the movie? Not far from New Orleans, Lizard Man. They said just outside New Orleans. It was a plantation. I'm not a serial killer yet, James. Try some French cuisine.
Ah, that's what it is, though, the respect for life.
Yeah.
Well, being an immortal vampire, you'd eventually have to give in and start killing people.
Yeah. Wow. I don't know if they do that stunt now with a horse jumping over an open fire. Because that appeared to be a real horse doing that.
Was this when Cruz was doing his own stunts?
I
Because
think
it
he's
kind
done
of
his
looked
own
like him on
stunt.
the horse.
Quite probably was him. He's done his own stunts for a long time.
So how often do they have to feed?
I don't know. I guess because I wonder how much of it with. You mean how long can they go between meals,
Exactly. In
or
this
how much?
universe, how
Yeah,
long?
I don't know because I guess maybe it's like with humans and food. But we tend to eat multiple times a day normally, but we could, in theory, go many days without food. But of course, would begin to deteriorate as we get weaker. So I don't know. I don't know. I'm guessing it's very similar to humans in that respect, that they have to eat, consume something fairly regularly to keep themselves in, tip-top shape.
Yeah.
Exactly, Hannah. Exactly, as often as humans, sort of every 4 to 6 hours, sort of
Wow.
several times a day.
That's a lot of people to go through.
Yeah. Well, James says vampires wouldn't need to eat too often. Not all the body count would give them away. Yeah. I
Especially when
guess
you've
that.
got more than one in a
Yeah. I
community.
guess there wasn't a manual though when he. I guess it wasn't like like joining a gym. You get an induction period for the vampire. Here's your manual. You'll be now eating 4 times a day.
Breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Then yeah, we'd recommend fingers as snacks in between meals.
And but the usual vampire lore, I think, still
Yeah.
holds true in Anne Rice's universe. I believe they don't cast reflections.
No.
Definitely the sunlight will kill them.
The garlic thing, I don't think does anything, and
Yeah.
crucifixes don't work because they say crucifixes specifically in this movie. Lizard Man, did he really need the torch? Seems like there's a candle in every room and very flammable curtains nearby. It is like everything in that house is flammable, but it's before, I guess, the age of when they actually made things fire retardant.
So this movie is all about Louis telling his story to
Yeah.
the journalist. In one of the next books in the Anne Rice trilogy, I think we learn about Lestat's background and
Yeah.
his story.
Now, here's a question. You said something there. This is Louis telling his story to the journalist Daniel.
Yep.
Is this from Louis's point of view then? Is Louis a biased storyteller here? Are the events maybe slightly different from Lestat's point of view?
Well, I think the obvious answer would be yes, because every time we tell our story,
Yeah,
we do have our own biases and it is from our point of view.
that's what I think.
Yeah.
It does frame very much Louis as the good guy in the story, and maybe he is completely the good guy. Exactly, Mad Matt, from a certain point of view. Yes, Hannah, the unreliable narrator. Thank you. That's the term I was
Yep.
looking for. Exactly, Edward. Maybe he is. Maybe he's a liar. Maybe Lestat is just a douche.
I think that would warrant maybe reading more of Anne Rice's
Yeah,
work and getting into exactly who Lestat was instead of Louis's perception of who he was.
yeah.
That just hurts. Any kind of cut on your wrist like that,
Yeah,
that that
exactly.
just hurts, man.
Exactly. Exactly. I not that bad, but I was doing some gardening yesterday, and I
Ooh,
just had a vine whip my arm when I was there. Not that bad. I didn't have a vampire come and get a wine glass and drain my arm, but it.
anytime you're hitting that nerve or that the
Yeah.
veins right there in that fleshy part.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly, Hannah. Major arteries are a big old no-no.
Yeah. Well,
Oh, he
you
keeps
kind of
whistling.
feel like they ought to put her out of her misery now.
Yeah. It's the dark sense of humour he brings to the role at part.
It just so over the top,
Yeah.
but it still fits in with Lestat.
Yeah.
This is the same intensity that Cruz brought to A Few Good Men in the
Yeah.
courtroom scene.
It is. It's also that, again, going back to that abusive relationship here. It's almost like an abusive spouse trying to make his partner do something they don't want to do, and convince them it's for their own good. It's pure manipulation here, isn't it?
It
It's
is.
great. It's great. It's. I mean, it's an unpleasant act, but it's great. The when you look into it like that.
And Lestat is the one that is making her suffer.
Yeah.
And now he's putting it on Louis to end the suffering,
Yeah.
making Louis own it.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't.
It's effectively spousal abuse, is what we're seeing here. Yes. Yeah, exactly, Hannah. Spot on. It's like a drug pushing spouse.
Wow, that was a powerful scene.
Yeah. And what you're seeing as well is that Lestat is just trying different ways of convincing him to go along with him. He's done the nicey, he's done so many different things.
I mean, it certainly has been a long time since I've seen this movie. Louis is holding out as long as he possibly can, and he's
It's like
fighting every urge
to become the monster. He doesn't
to
want to.
become a monster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eric says, so I'm the only one seeing Lestat as more a mentor. No, I see him as a mentor in that way, but it's, do you want him to be your teacher? What is he a bad teacher? He's trying to teach him what he doesn't want to know.
Well, in a way, he is because Lestat is a vampire. Louis is now a vampire,
Yeah.
so Louis is gonna have to know how to be one, and so Lestat is the one that wants to show him. But Louis still fighting it. Oh yeah, Kirsten Dunst.
Yeah, young Kirsten Dunst. But
She,
she's incredible in this.
yes. And anybody that remembers back when this movie came out, there was this big controversy about casting her so young
Mm.
and playing such a grown up role.
Yeah, I've not seen the TV show, Jesse. However, I do want to watch it. I've heard it's very good. She must have, if you look at it, how decayed her mother is. Her mother must have been dead for quite some time. I mean, all right, it may be warm and it's in and humid, and she was maybe unwell, but I mean, it's got to have at least been several weeks she's been dead with her mother. You know.
Yeah, and that just shows her innocence just with her
Yeah,
mom. And she's about to be thrown into a very different life.
yeah,
Another a reluctant vampire, and at such a young age.
yeah. She couldn't possibly have understood
Nope.
what she was to become.
But that was kind of a bit of a spoiler.
Yeah,
So I apologize to anybody that has not seen this before.
I think it's probably safe to say with a potential spoiler embargo of 29 years, we're probably okay.
Probably.
Yeah.
That is what streets used to look like before they were
Yep.
paved. Absolutely just disgusting.
It's also worth noting a lot of cities, the sewer systems used to be at ground level, and they just built on top of effectively they built on top of the sewers, and they just became underground because they built above the old city. Yeah.
Yep,
Well,
his
Mad
little
Matt.
mind
Well,
games.
that's interesting, Mad Matt. You're saying Too Young to Be a Vampire, already explored in The Lost Boys and both Near Dark from '87. However, Mad Matt, I believe the original book of this was written in 1976, and believe the character of Claudia was inspired by Anne Rice's daughter, who died, I think, of childhood leukemia. I think someone said, or cancer. Forgive me if I'm wrong. Yeah. So it's clearly trying to give immortality to a child, you know, she lost potentially. So, but what I'm saying is those tropes of the the child vampires from those '87 films, did they originally borrow it? Were they inspired by Interview with the Vampire as the book?
So the original book written by Anne Rice came out in 76. Is that right?
76. Yeah, I'm just looking here. 76.
Interesting. I remember it came out in the early 90s. It might have been just a publication of it and not the original
Yeah.
that I thought was the original, but okay.
It's probably one of them books that sat on a shelf for years until the movie rights were optioned and it gained
And then for some
popularity.
reason Anne Rice like was everywhere.
Yeah. Ow.
So now he's using a child to get Louis to
Yeah.
do it.
This is actually really, really strong manipulation because he clearly knows Louis had a child he lost. it said earlier by Louis that he had he'd lost his wife and his daughter, which is why he'd fallen into his dark depression. Yeah, exactly. It's exactly, Hannah. You're spot on with this movie. Lestat is doing the vampire equivalent of getting pregnant to convince her spouse not to leave. Yeah, it's trying to entrap him with a
Exactly
child.
right.
With a child.
Well, that's what master manipulators do. They use every tool at their arsenal to get you to do what they want. And she really does give this magnificent
Oh yeah.
performance.
I mean, at 12, I believe she was when she filmed
Hmm.
this. She's standing on her own with Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt, two major actors.
And the controversy surrounding this movie, casting her at such a young age, because this movie does put her in very adult situations where she has to be an adult, but she is 12.
Yeah.
I personally, I think it doesn't cross the line like some other movies. I think that do cross the line, manipulating and using children, which was uncalled for. But it's just her performance is just brilliant.
Yeah. Lizard Man says this is the most toxic relationship I've seen in media, and I've watched the Star Wars prequels.
Yeah, I saw the prequels in the theater when they came out.
I did, unfortunately, too, and convinced
Well, you
myself
had
they were.
to.
Yeah, everyone had to. It was
You
just
had to.
just a thing. Don't forget though, Phantom Menace only came out 5 years after this movie.
You're kidding.
Nope.
Well, we could put it into the 90s rotation of watch parties if
It could
we
potentially.
could.
There's a lot of other movies to watch before the Phantom Menace. Exactly, Edward. There's a lot of other movies to watch first. Don't worry. Hannah raises a really good point. This is 10 compared to stuff like Pretty Baby back in the 70s. But it's interesting the way they're framing these. The way they're framing these, this abuse and putting a spin on it is really interesting. That's what it's making it almost mainstream, the abuse. It's making you think about it in new ways. I think, like I say, I think this is also maybe why I didn't get so much from the film when I was sort of 16 years old. I just saw it as a bit of a horror chick flick at the time without the depth to it.
So
We,
has it been explained how so they're hobnobbing in high society? Are they wealthy? Is Lestat wealthy? Was it explained?
well, it's probably worth assuming that they've got. I mean, Louis was wealthy because he was a plantation owner and he obviously had a company, but I
Okay.
would assume they steal from their victims, from wealthy spinsters, etc. Plus, being so old, they've probably got a stack of antiques they sell from time to time, or they invest money in stocks over the hundreds of years. So I'd assume vampires have got lots of ways of making money. James, it's a vampire pretend family with Brad Pitt as mother. It's not a mainstream, but it was quite a mainstream movie. Oh, Lizard Man, I'm interested to see how things turn out come the American Revolution for these guys, at least. That's not really any different from this. Oh, I was going to say that's a very famous British actor who passed away sadly. He's in a lot of stuff. His name is Roger Lloyd Pack. He was a major actor in a TV show called Only Fools and Horses, which is a legendary British show over here. But it's probably worth talking about with Claudia. We can see that she's like she's like a child, but you'll know this, Sharon, from your kids. If you equate blood to cookies, she just helps herself to what she wants when she wants because she's got no limiting place for it because she just views blood as a treat and she'll just have it when she wants.
She's a 12-year-old vampire with a 12-year-old's brain.
Yeah.
And she might have time to experience, but her brain stopped developing.
Yeah.
And is she really growing to adulthood by being immortal, but staying in a 12-year-old body with a 12-year-old brain?
Yeah.
So that's a discussion in and of itself.
It really is. I mean, honestly,
Really never grow up.
I mean, without going into all the medical side of it, because when you go through puberty, your body changes so much, both psychologically with the hormones changing your brain and your body. None of that's happening to her.
None. And all she's getting is the experience of time.
Yeah.
But yeah, she would act as you would expect a 12-year-old to act.
Yeah.
But she's being used as a pawn in their little trio.
I think if I had one wish in this world, that it's top hats would come back into fashion for men. I think they're fantastic.
And the walking cane?
Yeah, I'd have a walking cane and a top hat. I would. Problem is, if I had a walking cane and a top hat now, I might be frowned upon when I went to the store to buy groceries. But back then, it was perfectly acceptable. Eric says, "Get one and just start wearing it."
Come back next week, Andrew. Have a top hat on.
Yeah, and a cane. I know they're not a thing in Britain anymore, Edward. I know, it's a shame. Top hat and a sword cane, I'd be great. Oh, Carl Redbird, thank you. On a penny farthing. Well, I don't think I could ride a penny farthing for a watch party. I might fall off for that.
There would be only one thing worse than being a 12-year-old vampire, and that would be probably being a 5-year-old vampire, 8-year-old vampire.
I don't know. I suppose as a 5 or an 8-year-old, if your brain didn't develop further, your understanding of the world may not grow any further.
Ugh. That would not be a great place to be stuck for all eternity.
No. Exactly, Lizard Man. Getting very baby doll vibes from this.
Yeah.
At the moment, he's almost like that. You know, when a kid starts to almost change and their interests change in things because they're growing up a bit, but you're maybe not on the same page as them. That thing that all kids do is they do age a little bit, where they used to like something one week and they don't the next week, and it's the worst thing in the world, the thing they used to love the most, and that's the kind of thing they're going through with her a bit. But I think it's more boredom with everything because she's starting to feel like she can't move on in her life.
Yeah, that would not be a great place for a girl to be stuck.
No.
She's not growing taller. She's not quite well. She saw the woman with the woman body, knowing she's never going to have that, and she's stuck in her body and her brain.
And especially as well, you've got to remember that of girls of that era, she would have been brought up to, her life goals would not have been those maybe of a more modern woman. They would have been, right, you will grow up to find yourself a husband and you will become a mother and you will have children. And that's what back then a lot of women, they were brought up that their lives would be, and that's what they were told to be. And she's never going to grow into that.
Yeah. But you can see her frustration. She has the benefit of time,
Yeah.
and she's starting to understand that.
Oh, that's really interesting, Carl Redbird. That'd be really cool. You could tell us the name of that. He's saying an anime I once watched had a 90-year-old vampire, and he was forever frail and weak and hated it.
Oof.
I suppose it's you're stuck wherever at the age you transformed at.
Well, given that, I would say the perfect age to become a vampire is probably, I'd say between 25 and 30.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's an interesting discussion here. Would a vampire still get their period? Which encompasses a whole discussion, the lore that vampires can't have kids because they are, in fact, dead. So that would make them all infertile.
Yeah.
Except if you belong to the Twilight lore,
Mm-hmm.
then you can even have a baby with a human.
Well, there was something else I saw where someone said about vampires and their where you see various vampire things and they try and put the science behind it. They're saying that vampires suffer from aplastic anemia, where they struggle to make blood in their own bodies. So they have to consume blood to replace blood because their bodies can't make it themselves. So that would be maybe one thing as to why they
Okay.
can't maybe why their bodies don't produce blood, excess blood, why they don't particularly bleed, as we're seeing.
And if in fact they're dead and they don't have heartbeats,
Yeah.
then the blood wouldn't circulate.
It wouldn't aerate, it would basically
Yeah.
decay.
And oh boy, that would bring us down a big rabbit hole about the medical feasibility of that. Could they even
Yeah.
be functioning if their blood didn't circulate, no matter how much blood they got?
Yeah. And also, in theory, they'd have to drain the blood out of their bodies for a period of time to replace it with fresh blood. I don't know. It's a real rabbit hole. I'm also
It is a
enjoying the
rabbit
way
hole.
I'm enjoying the way the world is actually changing around them at the moment. That it's going from sort of wooden shack buildings to blockwork buildings, and now we're seeing cobbled roads instead of just dirt roads. You know, the world is changing around them, but equally, it's framing the point that Claudia isn't aging. The fashions are changing, the world is changing, but she's still a 12-year-old girl.
How much time has gone by? Because they said he's walking years and years.
I don't know
So,
how long Claudia is supposed to be, but I can see that certainly the world is changing around
yeah.
them.
And she's still 12.
Yeah.
But not really, just trapped in a 12-year-old body.
Exactly, as well. There's supposed to be steamships now, so it's been a while. Also, he said that they're Americans now, so yeah, it might be 30 years, Calbot. And this is very much like they're both victims of Lestat now. Both his kind of, I mean, they're bonding over the abuse they received from Lestat. Yeah, they must be wealthy. They appear to have Fabergé eggs sat around the room there. So,
Good investments, maybe, or maybe you're
yeah,
right. They steal from their victims.
I would think so. They probably steal from certain targets. Lestat certainly would. He'd have no qualms about stealing from the wealthy dowagers, etc., that he seduces. Fraglord says they're killers, not thieves, damn it. Exactly, Edward. You can't be a vampire and live like a pauper. Or especially not in Lestat's world, because you've got to imagine Lestat views himself as royalty. He views himself as above people. He as a nobleman, as a king. So he would surround himself in opulence.
Yeah, but what's his day job, so to speak?
Well, I guess that.
Interesting, huh?
Well, I guess his day job is just being a wealthy man. I suppose, like a well-to-do man around town. You know, that kind of, as people were back then. He has a wealthy family. He is just a wealthy man that gets money from somewhere. No, you can't just walk in a house and kill the owner, fake some papers, and you own it. No, but they could have stolen a lot of jewellery,
Yeah.
expensive items, cash. Don't forget, most people would have had their money in cash back then.
And that might just be one of those things that I want to do a deep dive on the specifics.
Yeah,
And there's no answer. It's like the TV show Friends, or how could they live
yeah.
in that luxury with
That
those jobs they have?
multi-million-dollar apartment when they're a
Yeah,
waitress. Yeah,
you just suspend the belief, and it's all
yeah.
right. They're rich. Oh boy, she's killing like a professional now.
Yeah. Oh, James, is everybody a serial killer? You've now said the cast of Friends were serial killers in Friends as well.
They did live the lifestyle, though.
Yeah. But again, we're seeing this kind of plot line of an abusive relationship where they're laying a trap for the abuser. Oh, absinthe. Never again.
Uh-oh. She's the one that's laying the trap.
Yes.
She's tired of,
His control.
yeah, she's tired of the life that he gave her and stole from her.
Yeah. Okay, Mad Matt, I'll tell you my absinthe story since you posted the absinthe fairy picture from Euro Trip. I in the early 2000s, I once drank 3/4 of a litre of a bottle of absinthe, and it was illegal strength banned in the UK, and it was so strong when I went to bed that night, I started to hallucinate, and I was laying on the bed, and I looked over the edge, and the bed was flying. And then the bed started falling for what seemed like hours, and I was laying on the bed, screaming, holding onto the bed for forever. So yeah, not a fan of absinthe.
Why would you do that? Was it just something just stupid?
Stupid, as in my early
Stupid, yeah.
20s. Yeah, just something stupid. And yes, Hannah, Drop Dead Gorgeous is a phenomenal film. I recommend everyone watch.
So her idea was to bleed him out and then just dispose of his body.
That's
But
right.
really, you got to cut the head off, right? To kill a
Or burn,
vampire
or
with a
burn the
wooden,
body.
yeah, wooden stake, burn the body.
Yeah. And if you look in the background, you can see Kermit the Frog sat on a log with his banjo singing Rainbow Connection right now. It could be. It very could be, Hannah. The throat cutting is similar to Dracula's death in the original Bram Stoker novel via Kokiri. This could this be a reference to something quite possible? Yeah, Fraggle, Swamp Thing's night off. And was that Yoda over there, says Eric.
But what they're doing isn't actually gonna kill him unless his body is torn to pieces. Maybe that's what.
I think she's wrongly assumed he's bled out and he's dead. Maybe
Yeah.
because you've got to remember these appear to be rather inexperienced vampires. Lestat would know about the proper way to kill vampires. Louis maybe only knows the way of just draining the blood of sunlight, but they don't fully understand. Well, I guess, Hannah, the way he said some blood left in might be residual blood, because even when you have no blood in you, I guess if you bled out, the water running through you would rinse off any residual blood inside your body.
Well, and they think they're free, so
Yeah.
so that's it. Lestat actually bled out the alligator, probably.
Yep. He was
And
eating.
got out of the swamp. Yep.
Yeah, he explains he was consuming whatever life he could find in the swamp.
Boy, you'd think he would take the hint, but no,
Yeah.
he's gonna coming back for control. He's not gonna let them kill him off.
Well, Hannah says alligator is common in Bayou and Louisiana cuisine. Okay, strike that, Mississippi. I've actually eaten gator and crocodile before, and I don't like them. I don't. Have you ever tried them before, Sharon?
No, no.
The reason I don't like them is they taste like a cross between chicken and fish. Reptile meat does. Almost like a flaky, fishy kind of texture, but with a little bit firmer, closer to chicken. And I don't like fish, so that's probably why I don't like it. But
Interesting. What's the texture like?
like almost like a flaky white fish kind of texture,
Okay.
but a little bit firmer. But I don't like any fish, so it's
Yeah.
not the meat for me. And Lizard Man's writing something. I'm sure I've upset him. I'm not going to eat you, Lizard Man. Don't worry.
I've never tried, just because I've never really been in a place that has served it. But I've had exotic foods before. It's like, why not?
Yeah, I've tried exotic things.
Why not?
I've also tried kangaroo, which I didn't like very much either. Kangaroo tail. It tastes very close to. It's like it's kangaroo's tail steak you eat, and it's close to liver. Kind of taste, that kind of earthy taste.
So they burnt another house here.
Yes.
So time to move again, I guess.
Yeah.
And there goes the town. Well, that's one way to make an exit.
Yeah, but then if you consider the houses back, or the buildings back then would have been, yes, they would have been blockwork, but they were probably built over wood.
Man, I'm usually good at multitasking, but yeah,
It's a
doing
really
this,
absorbing them. It's an absorbing movie, this one.
it is. I haven't been paying attention to Discord at
That's
all.
okay. That's okay. Don't worry.
I'm usually all over the place.
Egypt, Russia. Is that supposed to be Germany or Transylvania in that castle we saw there?
I don't know. She did a couple of those drawings that look like just all over the world.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it was the Germany. I'm not sure if that was Germany, if that's supposed to be. Oh gosh, my German pronunciation's a bit bad. A Bavarian castle called Neuschwanstein Castle, I think it might have been. No, it's supposed to be Dracula's castle, Bran Castle.
So they're still rich. Would they take their money with them?
I guess they would have done, taken their
They,
dollars with them.
everything in gold, maybe.
Could be gold as well.
Yep.
I suppose a bit back then, how did you transfer money around the world? Was it in bearers' bonds? Did you transfer it into some kind of checks? I'm not sure. Yes, Edward, just rob rich people. No, Fraglord, they didn't have Bitcoin back then. And Lizardman, Paris isn't vampire country, it's hunchbacks. Hunchbacks live in Paris. Yeah, but they could have turned the hunchback into a vampire. But again, we can see we can see as time moves on, his clothes have become somewhat more contemporary again than they were before, sort of closer to what we know as a suit.
And
Either,
a lot
either
of
he's a
time,
magician now.
yeah, a lot of time has passed again.
Yeah. But they must have to be careful. I mean, if they obviously can't stay in the same. They must have to move around quite a lot to not around suspicion. Around. I mean, you could maybe get away with 10, 20 years of Louis not aging, but what about Claudia? You can't have a perpetual 12-year-old living there.
Yeah, she would probably be a dead giveaway after 3, 4, 5 years of not
Yeah.
aging. Especially they're making themselves known in high society. Very visible.
Yeah, quite possibly Fraglord. They had stocks, maybe papers for stocks or ship deeds or something like that for investments. Yeah, Calbot, run, mime. Yeah, that's a good point, Hannah. An inversion of Highlander where the child ages, but the unaging adult is the giveaway. Antonio Banderas. There
Yep,
it is.
another sexy vampire.
Yeah.
So, vampires going to other countries, would you know where the other vampires are hanging out? Do
I
you
think it's
know
supposed to
each
be they can
other?
sense them, potentially. Like some kind of Jedi Force thing.
Maybe the smell? Maybe like a pack of vampires has a smell?
Yeah, maybe they smell different from humans.
Maybe.
I think the thing as well, it's probably worth remembering that to us, Paris looks very old fashioned, but this was the height of modern society in this sort of era.
So, everyone here is a vampire, right?
All
Vampire.
the cast are.
Yeah.
All the actors are. So they're vampires pretending to be humans, pretending to be vampires, which is very clever.
Hiding in plain sight, then, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Stephen Rea, or Ray, there, British actor, absolutely fantastic.
Is that who it is?
And what a great way of basically you can slaughter someone in plain sight, and they think it's all part of the play. Yeah, Hannah. Honestly, this looks like a fun performance, like Not Scary Farm.
I know Stephen Ray from his performances later in his career. He looks so different.
V for Vendetta. He's one of my
Yep.
favourite movies is a British one of his called Still Crazy, where he plays an aging rock star. Really enjoy that movie.
You know, they could do nightly performances, have a new victim,
Yeah,
and
which
just
I'm assuming they probably do.
yeah, it appears that it's just acting.
And they think she's just another actress in the troupe. Exactly, Edward. If it wasn't the time of face powder of the time, people would wonder why everyone's so pale. Yeah, but also it's the perfect excuse as well. Look at it this way: they're a troupe of actors. That's their persona, who are obviously up all night rehearsing, performing, and whatever. So of course they would sleep during the day because they work at night. It's a very, very good cover.
And that's the one trope that holds true in this movie is the daylight. They can't be out in
Yeah.
the daytime. I think the Twilight movies was the one of the only ones where the vampires could be out in the daytime.
Yes, I know.
Sort, or maybe not, because it was in Washington, which was overcast all the time, and
No,
maybe
they could
they
be out in
kept it
daylight in the Twilight movies, but they sparkled in the daylight.
sparkle. That's right.
They looked like they'd taken a glitter shower, didn't they? Exactly, Hannah.
Um,
We don't talk about Twilight.
we don't talk about that. But I think we've all seen the Twilight movies, right?
Yeah,
Pretty much.
unfortunately. Unfortunately. But yes, Eric, in a Blade, they used sunscreen, didn't he? He put sunblock on him. I'm quite similar to a vampire in that respect. When I, as many know, I like my vacations in Florida. I live in the UK where we don't have a great deal of very hot sun. I actually have to wear child's sun cream when I'm out there. I have to wear SPF 100 and above.
Wow.
Otherwise, I just burn.
Well, it's best not to get burnt in the first place, so whatever you got
Yeah,
to do.
yeah. Yeah, Fraglord. Twilight is good fan fiction in bad cinema.
I love that.
Wow. Now, if I remember right, Paris has catacombs like this under it, even to this day. They're basically cemeteries under the city.
And the Phantom of the Opera
Yeah.
lived in the catacombs too.
Mm-hmm. You've had your teeth on there. Give it a wipe first. Yeah, I like that. He turns over to the other side, where the where they. It's like someone offering you a bite of something, and you don't take the bite where they've taken the bite, so you take the bite out, the fresh part of it.
Antonio Banderas was not a big star at this point, was he?
Not a huge star, I don't believe. I don't think he was at the height of his.
And he did the Zorro movie, I think, after this.
Oh, Zorro was
Yep,
1998.
a couple
He would
years
have done.
after.
Yeah, he would have done Desperado after this. But Desperado, of course, was a remake of the Assassin. Oh, El Mariachi, wasn't it? Sorry, El Mariachi. But he did star in he starred as Tom Cruise's partner in Philadelphia in '93. Before this, yeah, Fraglord. It's pre Desperado and pre Zorro.
Boy, a lot of heavy hitters in this movie
Oh,
before
definitely.
they really hit it big.
Yeah.
So back in the day when this was made, the budget $60 million. dollars.
Big
And
budget
it
back
did,
then.
yep, and it did over 223 million at the box office. So 60 million back then, that was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, it probably, I'm just assuming it didn't go towards the salaries that these guys get nowadays.
I think a lot of it's the sets as well. I
Yep.
bet.
Okay, so Julian Sands was championed by Anne Rice and fans of the novel to play Lestat, but because Sands was not a well-known star at the time,
Hmm.
he was rejected and the role was given to Tom Cruise.
I can see
And
Julian Sands in the role, but he probably would have paid it quite similar to the Warlock, I think.
yeah, and he wasn't that big of a star back then. And
Don't
Cruise,
forget, though, he would have also been around his controversy around boxing Helena.
oh yes, I remember seeing that, not knowing
Because
anything about it.
that was probably why the studio didn't want him as well, because it was only the year before that boxing Helena absolutely bombed and just destroyed so much.
I saw that on a video rental
Hmm.
and didn't really know anything going in other than what a Julian Sands. Hey, this looks like a good movie.
Yeah.
Lord,
It's a trip of a movie. It's a lot going on there. I did consider it for a watch party at one point when we got to the 90s, but it's just too much to get through. It's too hard going.
it's just truly bizarre.
Yeah.
Just sometimes it's just too much. So I'm sure that there's a rental floating around. I don't even know if it's. I'm sure it hasn't been pulled off the shelves, but anybody
Oh
that's
yeah.
interested in a really bizarre movie and hasn't checked it out, I don't know if I'd recommend it, but it's different.
Yeah. You can understand why it's forbidden though.
Yeah. Yeah. You just shouldn't be doing that to a kid, but
It's interesting though. It's yet again another vampire wants Louis to. I don't know. The vampires seem to really, really like being with Louis. They all. I don't know. There's something about him they like.
maybe an innocence.
Lizard Man, we are about 1 hour and 27.5 minutes in. Yeah. Thank you, Hannah.
And we've got about half hour left.
See, it moves.
Wow.
It doesn't have any lulls. It just keeps going. It doesn't. I wouldn't say it's a fast movie, but it's just constant. Okay, Eric, you get well, my friend. Is it wrong? I want to just reach out and stroke Antonio Banderas' hair in this scene. He
Oh
looks
no, it's
luscious.
long.
It's like touch that.
Just put your fingers through that. Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's thick and long and
Again, there is a sexual tension between the two here. Yeah, that's a good. But again, he's a vampire with a human soul, which is how Angel basically was in the Buffy universe. So, again, is that something that got lifted from the Anne Rice?
I might have to revisit her books because these she's making very interesting characters, or the
Yeah.
movie is taking making these very interesting characters from her book.
Yeah, and Angel and later Spike. Spike had his humanity without his soul, but
A vampire
with
with
a
a human
human
soul.
soul. Yeah.
And I seem to recall in the book Armand had a very big role in his life. If I remember correctly, I don't Armand was not just a background character. Oh boy, that's some heavy manipulation.
Yeah.
The kid wants a mom.
Yeah. Well, she realizes she can't function in the world on her own.
Yeah.
She always needs an adult with her. Oh, welcome, Plutonian, sure. This is another interesting point she's bringing up, and we're seeing in the story here. A child will always eventually grow up and really should leave the parent, leave the nest and grow into their own life. But because of her condition, how she was created, she will always have to have a parental figure with her because she can't function in the world. She can't, as a 12-year-old, she can't even go to do certain adult things on her own without a parent there to guide things.
Yeah, that's a very good point, especially as the world is changing around her.
Yep.
She's not free to live life as a grown up.
No. She could be 100 years old. She could be 200 years old right now. But she can't legally go and buy a house. She could have the money, but she
She
can't.
can't go to a bar.
No.
She can't drive.
Nope. Exactly, Mad Matt. That's a good image. And Louis
Yeah.
only doing this because he loves Claudia so much. But he also knows he can't be with her for forever. Exactly, Hannah. When people think of eternal youth, they don't always consider that youth has drawbacks. I would like to have been perpetually about 28, I think would have been the sweet spot.
Yeah, like I said, anywhere from 25 to 30 would
Yeah.
probably You know, our minds are young, bodies are young.
Yeah. Before you hit 40 and it all starts going south and your knees start to hurt.
Yes. And you wake up in the morning and just it hurts.
Yeah. Yeah, you get up and you sound like an erotic dancer
Mm.
for the blind
Yeah.
with all the clicking you make.
Although, if anyone has seen What We Do in the Shadows, that vampire movie, at the end, um, what is his name? Tika Waititi's character is, you know, a young vampire finally found the woman that he was supposed to be with, and she's now like 90 years old, and he turned her into a vampire. And they lived happily ever after. So maybe that's a little
Yeah.
bit too old. Your body's still creaky.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd want to be 90 years old chasing people down with my walking frame to
Yeah.
drink their blood.
Yeah, that would be a cool movie to do a watch party, but way out of the time frame.
Oh, yeah. So it's like I suppose we'll call them the coven. The coven have turned against him.
What is a group of vampires called?
I believe it is a coven.
Is it a coven? Like a coven of
Yeah,
witches, a coven of vampire?
I believe so. Or a guild. It's either a coven or a guild. I'm sure one of our Discord amazing members or YouTube
Yeah.
members will tell us. A coven. Kind of sucks that they have to share the term with witches. Yeah, James, thank you. It's a coven of vampires. Yep, Edward, it's a coven. Ooh, Mad Matt says a brood. Apparently it is a coven, but will accept many terms. If only I could get builders who worked this fast and efficient.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose as well, it's probably quite good that they realise neither of them had the dark gift of flight like some of the vampire. Ah, there is a, a mesh keeping them in, so they can't climb or fly. They did think about that. Well, Lizard Man, I know, saying only they could turn to bats. We saw one of the coven could fly. That was one of his powers.
But not turning into a bat. So this
Yeah.
that mesh would keep them
Yeah.
in. So would this really be a punishment, or would this be a welcome release?
Well, she dies in the arms of someone who loves her. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's certainly a torture for Louis
Yeah.
because he's unable to protect her and save her.
It is a sad end to her.
Yeah.
But really the only way that a vampire can die.
Yeah. Only Zorro can save her. But it kind of shows that the coven had nothing against Louis. It was the concept of Claudia, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Being
it
an
was
abomination.
an abomination.
It was almost like in their minds, they did it for his own good.
And for her own good.
Yeah.
And as an audience, we were able to see her tragic journey through this. And at the end, this is probably for the best.
Yeah. But they have basically killed his child now, and
Oh,
she's been his child for 100 years, 200 years potentially.
yeah, I'd say about 100 years has probably passed.
Yeah.
Well, he's got to be pissed.
Oh yeah. But you can also kind of see that within the coven, even though Armand should be the leader, there seems to be somewhat of a power struggle between Stephen's character and Armand going on within the coven.
Yeah, that was my question. So a vampire can cry.
It appears so.
In this universe, they can.
Yeah. Well, that's very interesting because that was actually a wine shop next to we saw in the frame then. Commer de Vin.
Well, that's convenient that
Yeah.
he's now pouring
It
all
must
the
be.
wine.
It's got to be brandy though, brandy wine or something we're seeing here because normal red wine isn't flammable. However, brandy wine would be. It must smell really good in there though.
And
All
he's
that.
burning them in their coffins.
Yeah.
So then he should
Yes.
probably be in one too if they're in their coffins, right?
No, they didn't lock him in the coffins. He got out his coffin.
Gotcha.
He waited until they're all asleep.
Oh, I know. What a waste of good brandy.
Yeah.
But yeah, great revenge.
Oh yeah. I've actually been to the Xavier brandy factory in France, and they had like a $100,000 bottle of brandy there from the Napoleon era on display. They had some cool stuff.
Never been opened, I'm assuming.
No, but they had some other brandy for us to try. It was very nice. But I guess this is one of this guy's kind of powers. It's almost like mind reading for movements, isn't it? He does. Ooh. So vampires can be killed by being cut in half with a scythe, it appears. If they receive significant body damage, I guess he can't sort of heal himself from that.
But if you just cut off a limb, they could probably survive, but you can't cut off their head and they
Well, he
survive.
kind of cut his body in half, didn't cut his torso
Yeah,
in half.
you don't recover from that.
No.
Mad, have you been saving that line? That's classic.
Yeah.
Side splitting laughter.
The fact it's a hearse. And I guess that child they were drinking earlier from is his familiar.
So the familiar is human, so you could have a human slave child, but just not a vampire child.
Yes. Vampires often have a familiar who is effectively a human slave or servant who can do things that the vampire can't do due to the sunlight problems.
Right. And be their guardian, I think, during
During
the
the
day.
day, yeah, that kind of thing. Exactly, Mad Max Fright Night guy and Renfield in Dracula is the most famous. Yep, there was Fraggle. There was one in Vampire in Brooklyn. And just so everyone knows, I have just added a Vampire in Brooklyn to the schedule for later this year.
That'll be fun. I haven't seen that.
Okay. What's quite scary is I've actually got the schedule for the rest of the year in front of me, and most of it is populated already.
Wow. What a tragic life.
It is absolutely alone.
Yeah. Everybody had been taken from him, and he's all by himself.
Yeah.
Well, the downside of being immortal.
And we're about to see my favourite sunrise in a movie ever. Here we are from the end of Superman the movie. And you just came out of seeing the film Tequila Sunrise.
Tequila Sunrise, that would be, what am I thinking of? Michelle
Pfeiffer.
Pfeiffer, Mel Gibson, and, hold on, Kurt Russell, if I remember
That's
correctly.
right, and Raul Julia. 1988 film.
And Raul Julia, yes.
Yeah. Yep, thank you, James, with Robert Towne directing. No, Edward, I didn't mean Gone with the Wind, my favourite sunrise, no.
That was a pretty good sunrise, though.
Yeah. But I'm excited because I'm seeing Superman the movie in the theatre on Tuesday. The 45th anniversary 4K restoration, yeah. So.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. That is such an 80s kind of fashion suit he's wearing, which is great for the era.
That's like a velvet leisure suit.
Yeah.
So if you were immortal, would you want to make someone else immortal so you wouldn't be alone, or
That's a
just
good question. It's would you share your punishment or your
would it
burden?
yeah, is it a punishment if you were by yourself, or if you had someone to share your eternal life with, as long
Yeah.
as they wanted it too? Would it be as tragic?
Lizman says, so over 100 years later, this place hasn't been torn down. Possibly if maybe he still owns the deeds of the land and they write to his company or something. Where you see these derelict buildings that belong to companies.
And they become historical landmarks.
Yeah.
So a lot of times the city and the county will protect them. And you noticed in the background they had looks like some elevated trains.
Yeah.
So I think we're in modern times now. The
Yeah. It's
building is dilapidated.
1988 because he just came out of the theatre seeing
Yep.
Tequila Sunrise. Yeah. Plutonian Shaw says, misery loves company. I don't know. Would you?
Would it be misery if you
If you had
had
the
a
right
companion?
person? I don't know.
I would still think being eternal is not all it's cracked up to be.
I think in some ways the connections that either of you shared with anyone around you would be terrible because you'd still see all your friends and everyone you cared for die.
Yeah.
It would just be the one person would be with you the whole time.
You know, Tom Cruise has seen better days.
Yeah. Well, Fraglord says, imagine all the Disney Plus shows one could see if you lived forever. That's true.
Over and over and over again.
Yeah. That's true. That's true, Hannah. Death Becomes Her would be a great watch party at some point. In fact, I'm going to put that on the schedule for later this year. We've got a few gaps left.
Was in the 90s, wasn't it?
Yep.
Late 90s?
Early,
If I
I believe.
remember.
Early or mid. I seem like Death Becomes Her might have been 90 something. Oh. 1992, that's what I thought. Yeah,
Oh
quite
my.
early 90s. Yeah. But I wonder how much of this is. I wonder how much of this is Lestat playing with Louis right now, and if he really is like this, because I can't see that Lestat would have deliberately left himself like this. Now you wonder if this is part of a wider game, because I can't see he would have sat there for 100 years, 200 years, and not been secretly consuming.
Well, he would have to at some
Yeah,
point, wouldn't he? Otherwise, they'd just wither away.
yeah, exactly. This is almost like he's laying a trap for Louis. I don't believe like I said, I don't believe he's been sat there the whole time. This is like the abuser playing the victim. Again, a trope you see in abusive relationships where it's trying to make Louis feel guilty, like he's done something to him.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Classic manipulation.
yeah. Yeah, he's been living on rats, James, with all the dead rats everywhere, but still think you probably would have had more than just rats for 100 years and not sat in that chair the whole time. Yeah, Fraggle, it's Spike in a wheelchair from season 2 of Buffy. Or is Spike in the wheelchair in season 2 of Buffy really Lestat? Remember what came first?
This stands up pretty well as a vampire horror movie.
Yeah. But the horror isn't the things you see on screen, it's the punishment of his life.
Oh,
It's the
the psychological aspect of it gets me
yeah,
every time.
it really is. It's more psychological horror, I think,
Mhm.
than graphic horror. Yes, Edward, the emotion is the horror. Yeah, well, Lizard Man, yes and no. You're saying here, he hears all that stuff about how bad Louis's life is, and the guy still wants to be a vampire. What an idiot! But it's the temptation. You hear the story of the man who had, everything in the world, all the money in the world, and it destroyed his life. Yet you still want to be a millionaire. It's that arrogance that a lot of people have in your mind that you think, well, yeah, but if I had that, I'd do it differently. Yes, Plutonium. This movie was supposed to be. Um, it was supposed to be River Phoenix, and I believe Christian Slater donated his fee after starring in the role.
Isn't that interesting, though? We all have romanticized versions of what being a vampire would be like,
Yeah,
of what life would be like if we didn't have our life being someone else. And it's always this romantic notion until and unless we actually are there, everything is just romanticized.
exactly. Lizard Man, if you refer. Oh no, not talking about the interview. The Vampire TV show apparently has got a second season. I did check on that earlier. I think it's about a different show. Well, Edward says, how would you not notice him sat in the back? I don't know. I think if I owned a convertible, I'd never leave it parked up with the roof down, like they do in movies.
So is he going to get his wish of becoming a vampire?
Well, we'll see. But the interesting thing is that Lestat, you see, this is why I think Lestat's been playing Louis as well. If you notice, he can actually drive a car, operate a stereo. He's a bit more familiar with the modern world than people would be led to believe. He's not wildly flailing the car from side to side. He's driving pretty competently.
Well, if he can't control Louis anymore, then he's going to find someone else he can. And maybe he
Yeah,
just found him.
exactly. But again, it's an abuser moving on to a new victim. And there we go, everybody. That was Interview with the Vampire. I've got to say, Sharon, thank you so much for joining me.
You're so welcome.
It's been an interesting movie. It's been absolutely brilliant. But while we're finishing off with this, let's get everyone's comments. I mean, I think this film works on so many levels. Sharon, what do you think?
Um, this isn't one that I see a whole lot, but it does hold up as a movie that you see every once in a while. It's very enjoyable.
Yeah,
I like it. I think I like it better than when I first saw it.
I think again for myself, I'm very much the same. I feel it's aged very well. I think it's got better. I'm seeing I see further layers into it. It's not exactly so. Going from some of the community comments, our Frag Lord saying can't remember the Queen of the Dead. Lidsman says not my usual vampire fare, but it was interesting to watch. Probably won't come back to it often, but you get its appeal. Phonics says it's a good movie. Just Cruise being Cruise is kind of out of place. Hannah Rose says what a film. Glad I got to see it with you all. Thank you, Hannah. Jedi Wizard says my rating great as always. cheese rating, mouldy gorgonzola only due to vampires. I think it's a great film. I think it really works on different layers. Like I say, it's probably more psychological when you look at it. Mad Matt says, never paid attention to this, but upon the watch, I'm amazed by how many vampire movies you've seen in it. Fraglord says, I like this movie. Saw it back in the day. I liked it then as well. Might be a bit slow and have a small story, but it's a classic. Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. Well, that's the end of this watch party. We will be back in 7 days. Dom will be back, and we're going into a mini film season for everybody. I have curated for you all. Let me get my list up here.
Drum roll.
Let's see. I can tell you what the next 4 movies are going to be. We're doing a bit of a dive into 90s teen horror. We will be watching... Next week will be Scream from 1996, the OG movie.
Yes.
We will be following that up with I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Good.
The week after, we will be watching Urban Legend. Which I don't know.
Okay, haven't seen that, I don't think.
Okay, and then we'll be finishing off that season with The Faculty.
Oh.
So we've got 4 weeks of that
Yes.
kind of 90s teen horror. I thought we'd get something really, really cool to, as the weather gets warmer and we're getting nearer summer, let's go with that.
And we are approaching Summer of Popcorn. This would be what, the 3rd year?
It'll be the 3rd year of the Summer of Popcorn.
Nice.
I'm not going to announce the movies yet. I've got the list actually in front of me. If you could read my glasses, you might see the reflection on the list on my screen here. But you can't, so I don't know. So
That's all right.
Yeah, it's a great list this year of some really, really solid stuff. And we've actually got one movie that doesn't match a lot of the genres, but we're doing it because, yeah, it's just so awesome. Anyway.
All right.
But we've still got plenty of other stuff to be getting on with until then. So like I say, next week we will be back with Scream from 96. So for the next 7 days, as always, stay safe, be kind to each other, and we'll see you then. Good night.
Bye-bye.